He looked her in the eyes and told her she would get nothing. Not land. Not money. Not even his name. But when the lawyer stood up and opened the final document, the room froze, because the truth had been hiding in silence for years. Temilade Arowolo grew up in a house where money was never a problem, but warmth was always missing. The Arowolo mansion in Ibadan was large, beautiful, and respected, yet it felt cold to her from a young age. Her father, Chief Adekunle Arowolo, was a powerful man in the city. People bowed when he spoke. His name opened doors. But inside the home, his voice only carried disappointment when it came to her. From childhood, Temilade noticed the difference. When her brothers achieved something small, their father praised them loudly, calling neighbors and relatives to announce it. When Temilade brought home good grades or quiet achievements, he barely looked up from his newspaper. At family dinners, her brothers spoke freely while she was corrected over small things. How she sat, how she spoke, how she laughed. Sometimes the corrections came with a sharp tone that made the room fall silent. Other times, they came with a calm sentence that hurt even more. She learned to swallow her words and lower her eyes. What hurt the most was not the shouting, but the silence. When she needed encouragement, her father was absent. When she needed guidance, he waved her away. It felt like being invisible in her own home. At weddings, naming ceremonies, and family meetings, her father often made jokes that cut deep. He would laugh and say that daughters were temporary guests, that whatever they built would eventually belong to another family. People would nod, some would laugh politely, and Temilade would sit there, feeling smaller with every word. She learned to smile even when her chest felt heavy. She learned to clap for her brothers even when no one clapped for her. As she grew older, Temilade stopped trying to impress him. She stopped waiting for approval that never came. Instead, she watched, listened, and learned. She noticed how power worked, how respect was earned, and how silence could be a shield. While others thought she was weak or unimportant, she was building something inside herself: patience, discipline, and quiet strength. By the time she reached adulthood, she understood one painful truth clearly. In her father's eyes, she would never be enough. And so, she made a quiet decision. If approval was something she would never receive, then independence would be something she would create. Temilade's 25th birthday was meant to be a quiet celebration, nothing flashy, just a family dinner in the large dining room she had grown up in. The table was full of food, laughter from her brothers, and polite smiles from relatives. For once, Temilade felt a small hope growing inside her. She had prepared her words carefully for days. She told herself this was the right moment, that maybe age and patience had finally earned her a chance to be seen. As the plates were being cleared and the room settled, she gathered her courage and spoke, her voice soft but steady. She looked at her father and said she wanted to work in the family company. Not as a boss, not as someone demanding power, but simply as someone willing to learn, contribute, and grow. For a brief second, the room felt suspended in the air. Temilade waited, her heart beating fast, hoping for questions, or at least consideration. Instead, her father answered immediately, without emotion, without thought, as if the decision had been made long before that moment. His words landed heavily, sharp and final, telling her she would never inherit anything from him. Silence filled the room like a thick fog. No one spoke. Her brothers exchanged looks and smirked, satisfied, as if a competition had just been settled in their favor. Her stepmother's lips curved into a faint smile, one that said more than words ever could. Temilade felt every eye on her, yet no one defended her. The food on the table suddenly looked untouched, distant, meaningless. She nodded slowly, forcing herself not to react, not to beg, not to cry in front of them. That night, she returned to her room and closed the door quietly. The moment she was alone, the tears came without warning. She cried into her pillow, not just for the words spoken, but for all the years she had spent hoping for acceptance. The rejection felt final, like a door slammed shut forever. But as the night grew quieter, something else replaced the pain. A calm resolve settled in her chest. She wiped her face, sat up, and spoke softly to herself in the dark. If she would never inherit anything, then she would build something of her own. If she would never be given a place, she would earn it. That sentence broke her heart, but it also woke her strength. Temilade left the mansion early one morning before the house fully woke up. She carried only 2 small bags, filled with clothes, old books, and a few personal items that reminded her of who she was before rejection hardened her heart. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. The large gates closed behind her quietly, as if the house itself was relieved to forget her existence. She did not look back. Looking back would have meant doubting herself, and she could not afford that. She rented a tiny apartment near Bodija Market, a place so small that the bed almost touched the kitchen space. The walls were thin, the noise constant, and the heat unforgiving. But it was hers. For the first time in her life, every decision she made belonged to her alone. The silence at night was lonely, yet honest. There were no servants, no family dinners, no false smiles. Just reality, raw and demanding. To survive, Temilade worked 3 jobs without complaint. In the mornings, she worked as an accounting assistant, balancing numbers and learning how money truly moved behind closed doors. In the evenings, she tutored students, helping them understand subjects she once dreamed of studying full-time herself. On weekends, she did data entry until her eyes ached and her fingers felt numb. She slept little, ate simply, and learned to stretch every naira carefully. Each job paid just enough to keep her going, but together they built discipline, patience, and strength. Back at the mansion, her family told a different story. When people asked where Temilade was, the answer came easily. They said she ran away because she was proud. They said she refused help, that she thought she was better than everyone else. Those words traveled faster than the truth ever could. Temilade heard about them through distant relatives and old friends. Each time, the sting returned, but she swallowed it quietly. The truth was much simpler and far less dramatic. She did not leave because of pride. She left because she refused to beg for worth. She refused to sit at tables where she was already dismissed. Every long night, every tiring shift, and every lonely walk home reminded her why she chose this path. She was not running away from her family. She was walking toward herself. And even though she had nothing, she carried something far more powerful with her, the decision to build a life that no one could take away. While her brothers continued to enjoy the comfort of family wealth, Temilade lived a life few people ever saw. There were no applause, no celebrations, and no one cheering her on. Her days were long and exhausting, but her nights were even longer. After returning from work, she did not rest like others her age. Instead, she opened her books, watched online lessons, and studied until sleep finally claimed her. She understood that knowledge was the one thing no one could take from her, so she held on to it tightly. She taught herself finance by reading case studies and breaking down balance sheets late into the night. She learned property law slowly, line by line, understanding how ownership really worked beyond family names and inheritance. Digital investments became her secret obsession. While others scrolled through social media, she studied market patterns, risks, and long-term strategies. Every small lesson felt like a brick added to an invisible foundation she was building under her future. Money was still tight, but Temilade was careful and disciplined. She saved little by little, sometimes sacrificing comfort to put something aside. When she finally began investing, she did it quietly. She bought small shares, never large enough to attract attention, never enough to raise suspicion. Her name never appeared on any documents. Everything went through shell companies and trusted intermediaries. To the outside world, she was still just a struggling young woman trying to survive. In reality, she was learning how power moved without noise. During this time, she met barrister Temilade Arowolo, a calm and observant man who noticed her seriousness. He became her mentor, guiding her without asking too many questions. One evening, after reviewing documents together, he looked at her and asked gently, Who are you really preparing for? The question hung in the air, heavier than it sounded. It was not about exams or investments. It was about her purpose. Temilade did not answer immediately. She thought of the dinner table where her voice was ignored, the words that told her she would inherit nothing, and the years of being treated as invisible. Then she spoke, her voice steady and clear. She said she was preparing for a future where she would never be dismissed again. A future where no one could silence her with titles, money, or family power. Barrister Cunnell nodded, understanding more than she had said. Those years passed without recognition, but they were shaping the woman she was becoming. And when the world finally looked her way, it would realize she had been ready all along. Years passed, and the strong image of the Arowolo family slowly began to crack. Chief Arowolo, once feared and respected, fell seriously ill. The man who controlled everything with a firm voice now lay weak, speaking less, watching more. As his health failed, the family company started to shake. Decisions that once required wisdom were now handled by his sons, who had confidence but little discipline. They argued, spent carelessly, and ignored advice they did not want to hear. Money began to disappear quietly. Contracts were lost because of arrogance. Trusted partners walked away after being insulted or ignored. Debt started piling up, first small, then heavy enough to cause panic. To cover their mistakes, the brothers began selling off family properties. Houses, plots of land, and shares that had taken decades to build were suddenly put on the market. They told themselves it was temporary, that things would soon improve. But the truth was harsher than they were willing to admit. What they did not know was that someone was watching every move. An anonymous buyer appeared again and again, calmly purchasing the very assets the family was letting go of. The offers were fair, the payments fast, and there were no negotiations. To the brothers, it felt like luck. To them, it was a relief. They never questioned who was behind the transactions. They were too busy trying to save face. While all this happened, Temilade remained distant. She did not attend family meetings. She was never seen in the hospital corridors where relatives gathered to whisper and argue. Her name was not mentioned in discussions about saving the company. To them, she no longer mattered. And she allowed them to believe that. She stayed silent, not because she was unaware, but because she understood timing. From a distance, she watched the collapse unfold piece by piece. She read reports, reviewed figures, and followed the movement of assets with calm focus. There was no joy in what she saw, only clarity. This was not revenge. This was consequence. Everything her father had dismissed, everything they thought she could never understand, was now shaping the outcome of their future. She did not rush. She did not interfere. Silence became her strength. While the family struggled loudly, she moved quietly. While they panicked, she planned. Each passing week brought the truth closer to the surface. The foundation they stood on was no longer theirs, and they did not even realize it yet. Temilade waited, patient and prepared, knowing that when the moment came, the truth would speak louder than any argument ever could. The day of the will reading arrived quietly, but the air inside the private law office was heavy with expectation. Thick curtains blocked the afternoon sun, and the room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Everyone had dressed carefully, as if clothing alone could secure inheritance. The sons sat close together, whispering with confident smiles, already dividing properties in their minds. They spoke in low tones, laughing softly, certain the future belonged to them. The stepmother sat upright, adjusting her gelly again and again, her lips pressed into a thin, controlled smile. She greeted the lawyer warmly, too warmly, as if reminding him she had always been the loyal wife. Every few seconds, her eyes scanned the room, measuring who mattered and who did not. To her, this was the final reward for years of patience. Temilade arrived without noise. No dramatic entrance. No greetings meant to impress. She took a seat at the back of the room, hands folded, expression calm and unreadable. Some family members glanced at her briefly, surprised she even showed up. Others ignored her completely, as if she were just another stranger in the room. She did not mind. She had learned long ago that silence could be powerful. The lawyer finally settled into his chair and cleared his throat. The whispers stopped. Phones were lowered. Every eye moved toward the table at the center of the room. Papers were arranged carefully, each page holding the weight of a lifetime. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his voice steady but serious, and announced that the reading of Chief Temilade Arowolo's will was about to begin. A sudden stillness followed. Hearts raced quietly. The sons leaned forward, already convinced their names would be called first. The stepmother straightened her back, ready to receive what she believed she deserved. Even distant relatives held their breath, hoping for a surprise mention. Temilade remained still. She did not lean forward. She did not fidget. Her calm stood out in a room full of hunger. Inside her, there was no fear, no excitement, no anxiety. Only readiness. She had imagined this moment many times, not with anger, but with clarity. Whatever was written on those pages, she knew one thing for certain: her life no longer depended on her father's approval. As the lawyer reached for the first page, the sound of paper moving felt louder than it should have. This was the moment the family had waited for, the moment they believed would define their worth. No one noticed Temilade's quiet breath, steady and controlled. They did not see the way her eyes stayed focused, not on the people, but on the truth that was finally about to be spoken out loud. The lawyer began reading slowly, his voice calm and professional, but every word landed heavily in the room. At first, everything sounded exactly as the family had expected. One by one, properties were listed and assigned to the sons. Large houses, pieces of land, and valuable buildings were mentioned. Each name spoken made the brothers exchange satisfied glances. Their confidence grew with every sentence, their earlier whispers now replaced with relaxed smiles. Then came the accounts. Bank balances, investments, and personal assets were assigned to the wife. She nodded gently, her fingers tightening around her handbag, as if holding on to victory. Her smile widened just enough to show relief. This was the ending she had imagined. Order was being restored, and the family hierarchy remained untouched. Some relatives sighed in approval. Others nodded quietly, already convinced the story was over. The room relaxed, the tension easing into comfort. It felt predictable, safe, and familiar. The powerful remained powerful. The overlooked stayed invisible. No one even glanced at Temilade. In their minds, her part in the story had ended long ago. Then something changed. The lawyer stopped reading. He adjusted the papers in front of him and paused longer than necessary. The silence that followed felt strange, almost uncomfortable. The sons looked up, confused. The stepmother shifted in her seat, her smile slowly fading. Someone cleared their throat at the back of the room. The lawyer spoke again, but this time his tone was different. Slower, firmer. He announced that there was an addendum to the will. A final instruction written 2 years before Chief Arowolo's passing. The air in the room instantly tightened. Bodies leaned forward without realizing it. Smiles disappeared. The brothers sat up straight, their brows creasing with sudden concern. The stepmother's hands froze in her lap. Even relatives who had already relaxed felt their curiosity spike. An addendum meant change. It meant something hidden. It meant the story was not finished after all. Eyes moved quickly from the lawyer to the stack of papers, then to each other. Questions formed silently. Why was this not mentioned earlier? What could be added after everything had already been shared? Whose name could possibly come next? For the first time since the reading began, people looked toward Temilade. Just briefly. Just enough to wonder. She remained still, her face calm, her posture unchanged. There was no smile, no shock, no sign of victory. Only quiet patience. The lawyer placed his finger on the page of the addendum and took a breath. The room leaned forward as one. In that moment, everyone realized something important. What they thought was the end was only the beginning. The lawyer slowly lifted his eyes from the document and looked across the room. His gaze did not stop on the sons. It did not turn to the wife. Instead, it settled firmly on Temilade. The room noticed the shift immediately. Whispers stopped. Breathing slowed. Temilade felt the weight of every eye turning toward her, but she did not react. She sat still, hands folded, face calm. The lawyer spoke clearly, each word measured. He explained that over the last 3 years, several controlling shares of the family company had been quietly repurchased. These were not random transactions. They were planned, legal, and intentional. The purchases were made through different channels, under different names, carefully structured to avoid attention. He paused briefly, letting the meaning sink in. Then he revealed the truth. Those repurchases were done under direct instruction of the beneficiary. A sharp sound cut through the room as someone gasped. Another relative covered their mouth. The brothers exchanged confused, angry looks. None of this made sense to them. They had believed the company was falling apart. They had believed assets were slipping away to strangers. They never imagined those strangers were connected to this room. The lawyer continued, his voice steady but firm. He announced that the Arowolo Holding Trust, which now controlled the majority shares of the company, had only one inheritor. He said her name slowly, clearly, with no hesitation. Ms. Temilade Arowolo. The room froze. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute, like a sudden storm with no warning. For a second, no one spoke. No one breathed. Then chaos exploded. One brother jumped to his feet, shouting that it was impossible. Another accused the lawyer of fraud. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor. Papers were knocked aside. The stepmother screamed, her voice sharp and broken, demanding explanations that no one was ready to give. Faces flushed with anger and disbelief. Through it all, Temilade did not move. She did not smile. She did not stand. She did not raise her voice. She sat exactly as she had before, steady and composed, as if she had been expecting this moment for a long time. Her calm was more powerful than any shout in the room. It unsettled people more than the revelation itself. The lawyer raised his hand for silence, but the noise continued around him. Temilade remained untouched by it. Inside her chest, her heart beat fast, but her face showed nothing. Years of being ignored had taught her control. Years of preparation had taught her patience. The truth was finally spoken aloud, but she did not need to announce it. The documents did that for her. While others lost control, she held on to hers. In that moment, the forgotten daughter did not claim victory. Victory had already claimed her. The lawyer lifted his hand, calling for silence, and the room slowly stilled. Every eye was on Temilade, but now the weight of the revelation hung heavier than ever. The lawyer's voice was calm, deliberate, carrying a quiet authority that made even the loudest relatives pause. "Your father knew his mistakes," he said slowly, letting each word sink into the stunned faces around the room. He said only one child understood value without entitlement. Only one could be trusted to grow what she was given wisely. Murmurs ran through the room. The brothers' faces twisted with disbelief and anger. The stepmother gasped, clutching the edge of the table as if bracing herself against a storm. But Temilade did not flinch. She had waited for this moment for years, and now it was hers to speak, not in anger, not to boast, but simply to state the truth. She took a deep breath and let her voice fill the silent space. "He said I'd inherit nothing," she said, her tone steady, calm, and precise. "So I built everything myself, and he noticed." Her words were quiet, almost understated, yet they hit the room like thunder. Every relative froze. The arrogance, the doubt, The sneers that had accompanied her life in that household now fell flat in the face of undeniable proof. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wave her hands. There was no gloating, no show of triumph. She simply let the facts speak. The trust, the investments, the silent years of hard work, all of it now declared openly. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos around her. Her brother's shouts, the stepmother's flustered questions, and the gasps from cousins and family friends only highlighted her composure. For the first time, the household that had never valued her saw her not as the daughter who could be ignored, but as the woman who had quietly, persistently, and intelligently built her own empire. Temilade's eyes scanned the room briefly, and in that small, composed glance, there was no bitterness, no hatred, just clarity. Years of rejection, dismissal, and neglect had not hardened her into anger, they had sharpened her into someone unshakable. This was not a moment of revenge. It was the declaration of truth. And in that calm, controlled declaration, everyone in the room understood one thing. The daughter who had been deemed never enough had quietly become everything. Months after the shocking will reading, Temilade walked through the halls of the newly restructured Arowolo Holding headquarters. The air was different now. Calm, purposeful, and filled with quiet determination. Gone were the whispers of favoritism, the fear of failure, and the tension that had gripped every corner under her brother's mismanagement. Instead, each department hummed with focus and accountability. Workers greeted her respectfully, not out of fear, but because they saw fairness in leadership and knew their efforts truly mattered. Temilade had rebuilt the company not just as a business, but as a place where integrity ruled and merit replaced entitlement. She had carefully retained every capable employee, ensuring no one was unfairly dismissed. Systems were overhauled. Corrupt practices were rooted out, and transparency became the new foundation. Every decision reflected the principle she had carried silently for years. Value is earned, not inherited. Investors who had once doubted her presence now respected her, not for the name she carried, but for the results she achieved and the wisdom she wielded. On the day of the grand opening of the new office, journalists, investors, and longtime employees gathered to witness the transformation. Cameras clicked, microphones leaned in, and questions were poised, but all eyes kept returning to Temilade. One journalist stepped forward, curiosity and admiration in her eyes. "Ms. Arowolo," she asked, "after everything you went through, what does inheritance mean to you?" Temilade paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the room filled with the people whose lives were touched by her leadership. Then, with a calm and soft smile, she answered, "Not what you're given, but what you're trusted to protect." Her words struck the room with the quiet power of truth. They resonated far deeper than wealth or titles ever could, capturing the essence of her journey. She had taken rejection, neglect, and dismissal and transformed it into a legacy not of riches, but of trust, vision, and resilience. The crowd nodded, some wiping tears, others smiling with relief, as the atmosphere shifted. Temilade's story was no longer just about a daughter who was denied. It was about a woman who built, protected, and redefined what it meant to inherit, not possessions, but responsibility, integrity, and lasting impact. And as the doors opened to the bustling offices, it was clear, the legacy had been rewritten, and it would endure far beyond anyone's expectations.